The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. With those words, Carl Jung invited us to step beyond the surface of human experience and into the labyrinth of the inner world. In today's lecture, we journey into a realm that only a rare few ever glimpse the signs of a mind so profoundly deep, it escapes the understanding of 99% of people. This is not a lecture about superiority, but about individuality. It's about those who live in the tension between outer conformity and inner truth, thinkers, feelers, empaths, creators, and intuitive souls who often feel like strangers. In the world that we will explore 8 powerful signs that your mind is not only rare, it is archetypal, deeply intuitive, and often misunderstood by the masses. These signs are not always comfortable. They can isolate you, but they are evidence that you are on a unique path of individuation, Jung's great task of becoming whole. So if you've ever felt like your thoughts travel deeper, your questions pierce further, and your dreams carry a meaning no one else seems to notice, this lecture is your mirror. Let us walk together into the symbolic, the unconscious, the intuitive, and the transcendent, where rare minds are not only understood, but awakened. You constantly seek meaning beyond the obvious, because surface-level answers rarely satisfy your inner curiosity. You are not content with what is presented at face value. You want to know why, what lies beneath, and what connects it all together. This is not a trait you chose. It's almost as if your mind was wired to look beneath appearances, to decode the symbolic meaning behind ordinary events, to translate the physical world into something spiritually or psychologically rich. Whether it's a casual conversation, a historical event, or a personal experience, your instinct is to dig deeper, to trace back the invisible roots of what appears on the surface. People may accuse you of overthinking or reading too much into things, but for you, meaning is not optional, it is essential. This inner orientation mirrors what Carl Jung called the process of individuation, the deep, ongoing desire of the self to unfold its true nature through symbols, dreams, and inner exploration. You might find yourself questioning things others take for granted, social norms, religious dogmas, traditional roles, or inherited beliefs, not out of rebellion, but out of an innate hunger for authenticity. You often see contradictions where others see clarity. You recognize that truth is not binary, it is layered, paradoxical, and often revealed through inner tension. Your mind delights in the mystery of it all, in the tension between the known and the unknown, the conscious and the unconscious. You might have found yourself deeply immersed in philosophy, psychology, metaphysics, or spiritual traditions, not to impress others or accumulate facts, but to answer a persistent internal whisper that asks, what is this really about? Even your casual observations of life tend to spiral into profound introspections. A glance at nature can lead to a meditation on life cycles. A heartbreak can lead to a study of attachment, shadow work, or the alchemical process of emotional transformation. This tendency can create a sense of inner solitude, while others may find fulfillment in simple pleasures or unquestioned routines. You often wrestle with existential questions. Your mind is not content with repetition. It demands evolution, transformation, and insight. You may feel like an outsider in many social spaces, not because you're arrogant or detached, but because the kinds of conversations that feed your mind are rare. You are the type to be more moved by a moment of silence than a loud celebration, more intrigued by a paradox than a solution. You might also experience dreams, synchronicities, or inner promptings that feel more real than outer reality. You don't dismiss them as coincidence. You experience them as the psyche's language, the unconscious communicating with the conscious mind. This makes you highly attuned to the symbolic world. A repeated number, a familiar image in your dreams, a powerful inner sensation. All these are pieces of a larger picture your mind is constantly assembling. You may keep journals, sketchbooks, or audio notes because your insights are fleeting, yet potent, and you feel the need to preserve the wisdom that passes through you. Your mind is not satisfied with information, it longs for revelation, for insight that transforms the soul, not just stimulates the intellect. You feel deeply misunderstood, even in crowds, because the way you perceive reality often doesn't align with how others interpret the world. You can be in a room full of people and still sense an invisible wall between your thoughts and theirs. Your mind runs on different frequencies, processing emotions, unspoken energies, and subtle cues that most people overlook or ignore altogether, while others talk about weather, entertainment, or surface-level happenings. Your thoughts drift toward the deeper questions of identity, purpose, and unconscious motivation. This inner dissonance creates a feeling of separateness, not arrogance or elitism, but a quiet recognition that your way of relating to the world isn't widely shared. You often find yourself simplifying or censoring your words so you don't overwhelm or alienate others. You might nod along in conversations that don't interest you just to preserve the peace, while inside, your mind is exploring complex patterns, or wrestling with profound internal questions. This sense of being misunderstood isn't always visible on the surface. You may smile, interact politely, and appear socially adept, but deep down, there's a persistent ache, a desire to be seen, not just looked at, to be heard, not just listened to. You crave connection at a level that goes beyond shared interests or mutual convenience. You long for resonance, for someone who can meet you in the realm of depth, where masks are dropped and essence is revealed. But this kind of connection is rare, and so you often settle for solitude. You learn to find comfort in your own company, creating a rich inner world where your thoughts are not judged, questioned, or misunderstood. Carl Jung described the inner self as something that cannot be fully grasped through external validation. You live in that truth. Your insights often come from quiet reflection, dreams, intuitions, and emotional undercurrents that most people are too distracted to notice. When you do try to express your deeper thoughts, they are often met with confusion, indifference, or even defensiveness. It's not that people don't care, it's that they don't have the frame of reference to understand what you're truly trying to say. This creates an inner tension between your desire for authenticity and the need to adapt to a world that operates mostly on surface dynamics. There are times you wonder if you're speaking a different language, one that prioritizes inner truth over external acceptance. You may be seen as overly intense, too serious, or too much by those who prefer lighter interactions. But to you, those depths are where life becomes meaningful. You often pick up on what's not being said, the emotions behind the words, the motivations behind the actions, the stories beneath the smiles. You carry the weight of these perceptions, not as burdens, but as truths that must be honored. You know that real understanding doesn't come from mere words, but from presence, attunement, and a willingness to venture beyond the obvious. This can make you feel invisible in a world obsessed with appearances, but it also makes you a powerful observer of human nature. You see through things, not to judge, but to understand, to heal, and to grow. You experience intuition as a guiding force, not just a fleeting feeling or passing thought, but as a deeply rooted internal compass that often knows the truth before the facts reveal themselves. This intuitive awareness operates like a quiet, persistent whisper beneath your conscious mind, leading you toward insight, cautioning you from danger, or nudging you toward possibilities others don't yet see. While the world often demands logic, analysis, and evidence, you operate with an invisible map, one that senses energy, patterns, and underlying meaning without needing to rationalize every step. This doesn't mean you ignore logic. Rather, you see intuition as a complementary wisdom, a nonverbal intelligence that connects you to something greater than linear reasoning. You often know things without knowing how you know them. And while others may second-guess or overthink, you feel your truth rising instinctively from within. Carl Jung described intuition as perception via the unconscious, a function of the psyche that reveals what is not yet manifest, what lies beneath and beyond. For you, this is not a theory, it's a daily reality. You may walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional climate. You may meet someone and instantly perceive whether their presence aligns or disrupts your peace. You might receive flashes of insight during moments of silence, or wake from dreams that feel more instructive than waking conversations. Your mind is wired to synthesize complexity into clarity, often bypassing traditional steps of deduction. While others may view this as luck, coincidence, or imagination, you understand it as a form of intelligence that speaks its own language. Because of this intuitive strength, you often find yourself making decisions that others don't understand. Until much later, you might change direction suddenly, take bold leaps of faith, or withdraw from situations that appear fine on the surface but feel wrong deep inside. These moments can be isolating because your inner knowing is often ahead of external validation. People might question your timing, your motives, or your methods, not realizing that your choices are not impulsive, they are rooted in profound inner certainty. You have learned, often through trial and error, that ignoring your intuition leads to regret, while honoring it brings alignment and growth. Your intuitive mind also thrives in symbolism, metaphor, and archetypal meaning. You are naturally drawn to mythology, dreams, mysticism, and the unconscious realm because they mirror the language of your soul. A single image may speak volumes to you. A subtle feeling might carry the weight of an entire story. This orientation, makes you highly sensitive to synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that reveal a hidden order beneath chaos. When they occur, you don't dismiss them. You listen, interpret, and respond. You are also highly attuned to future potentials. You often feel things unfolding before they become visible, sensing the emotional or psychological trajectory of situations. This forward-seeing ability can sometimes feel like a burden, as others resist what you already know in your bones. But, over time, you've come to trust this gift more than the external noise, knowing that your intuition, when refined and respected, rarely leads you astray. You are drawn to the shadow side of human nature, not out of fascination with darkness, but because you instinctively understand that wholeness cannot exist without integration. Where many people avoid discomfort, deny flaws, and suppress inner conflicts, you are compelled to explore them. You sense that healing doesn't come from pretending everything is fine, but from turning toward the parts of ourselves that we have been taught to reject. You are not afraid to ask uncomfortable questions, to challenge illusions, to confront the darker parts of your own psyche and the world around you. Carl Jung described the shadow as the unknown, hidden side of the personality, those traits we disown but which still influence our behavior and perceptions. You don't view the shadow as evil, but as necessary. To you, avoiding the shadow is avoiding the truth of human complexity. This draw toward the hidden, the repressed, the unspoken, often makes you a witness to other people's vulnerabilities. Strangers might tell you their secrets without understanding why friends may break down in your presence after holding themselves together for too long. You don't shy away from grief, confusion, rage, or fear. You hold space for these emotions as valid expressions of the inner world. You know that what is not faced in the light festers in the dark, and so you have developed a kind of psychological courage. This gives you the ability to navigate emotional terrain that others find overwhelming or uncomfortable. You are the one who notices when someone's smile masks sadness, who hears the pain behind the jokes, who sees the fatigue in eyes that appear cheerful because of your relationship with the shadow. You have likely experienced your own internal battles, periods of deep questioning, emotional intensity, or existential unrest. Rather than run from these experiences, you dig into them, seeking to understand what they are revealing about your inner life. You might journal obsessively during these times, analyze dreams, study psychological theories, or withdraw into solitude to allow your emotions to surface without judgment. You have learned that the shadow is not a threat, but a teacher, one that reveals the parts of yourself that need compassion, boundaries, honesty, or transformation. This internal work often creates a sense of depth and maturity that sets you apart. Even if others don't recognize the inner labor you've undertaken, your ability to hold space for both light and dark gives you a unique insight into the human condition. You're not fooled by appearances or drawn to superficial narratives. You know that every person carries contradictions, that healing is messy, and that growth often comes disguised as breakdown. This perspective makes you an alchemist of the soul, someone who can take raw, painful, even shameful material and transmute it into wisdom. You don't judge the shadow, you listen to it. You know it holds keys to creativity, authenticity, and power. You have discovered that what we most fear within ourselves often holds the greatest potential for liberation. And so you move toward what others avoid, trusting that the descent into the unconscious is not a fall, but a return to the self. You think in symbols, archetypes, and patterns, because your mind is naturally wired to interpret reality through layers of meaning that transcend the literal. Where others might see an object, you see metaphor. Where others focus on facts, you look for the underlying blueprint that connects events across time, emotion, and experience. Carl Jung believed that the human psyche is structured around universal archetypes, recurring images and themes that appear in myths, dreams, religions, and even daily life. You resonate deeply with this idea because it reflects the way you intuitively make sense of the world. Rather than processing life through a purely rational lens, you interpret it through imagery, energy, and rhythm. A tree is not just a tree, it is a symbol of growth, roots, lineage, and the interplay between heaven and earth. A conflict is not merely a disagreement, it becomes a reflection of the eternal struggle between shadow and light. This symbolic vision shapes the way you learn, communicate, and make decisions. You may find yourself gravitating toward dreams, poetry, spiritual teachings, or mythology. Not out of whimsy, but because they speak a language your soul understands. Logic and structure have their place, but they do not provide the full picture. You know there are truths that can't be articulated in bullet points, only in images, rituals, or inner knowing. Patterns emerge everywhere you look, in the way people repeat emotional cycles, in the rise and fall of civilizations, in the timing of events that seem too precise to be mere coincidence. You are not content with isolated facts. You seek the design that connects them. This makes your thinking both deep and nonlinear, often producing insights that feel more like revelations than conclusions. Others may struggle to follow your train of thought because you often leap from idea to idea by instinct rather than convention. You may begin a conversation with a story and end with a profound metaphor, linking experiences that seem unrelated on the surface but are intimately connected at a deeper level. You might explain emotional truths through symbols that emerge in your dreams, or relate life events to myths that have guided humanity for centuries. This is not abstraction for the sake of complexity, it's the way your mind naturally organizes reality. You are decoding the unseen language beneath appearances, translating the outer world through the inner lens of your psyche. This orientation allows you to see meaning where others see randomness. It helps you interpret your own life as a journey, not just a series of disconnected events. You recognize initiation moments, symbolic deaths and rebirths, cycles of transformation that mirror ancient stories repeated across cultures and time. In your mind, everything is part of a larger narrative, one that transcends personal experience and taps into something collective, eternal, and deeply human. This symbolic consciousness gives you insight into human behavior, spiritual evolution, and even your own purpose. You're not only living your life, you're interpreting it, shaping it, and finding your place within the grand architecture of meaning that speaks to those rare minds who can perceive what lies beneath the veil. You struggle with the tension between isolation and insight because the very nature of your depth often distances you from others. The more you see, feel, and intuit, the more aware you become of how different your inner experience is compared to those around you. It's not that you intentionally separate yourself, but rather that the weight of your thoughts, the sensitivity of your perceptions, and the complexity of your emotions create an internal world that few people truly understand. This inner world is a place of profound insight. You discover truths there that illuminate the human condition, unlock personal revelations, and reveal hidden patterns in life itself. But that same world can become a kind of barrier, a wall, of depth that others are either unwilling or unable to scale. You are caught in the paradox of having vision that isolates and solitude that enlightens when you try to share what you see. You often find that words are inadequate or misunderstood. People may respond with blank stares, shallow responses, or even discomfort when you reveal something vulnerable or profound. Over time, this trains you to speak less, to withdraw more, to keep your most powerful insights tucked safely within the fortress of your mind. And yet, that withdrawal comes at a cost. You yearn for communion, for resonance, for dialogue that meets you where you are, not just intellectually, but emotionally, spiritually, symbolically. You want to be known, not for your accomplishments or personality, but for the essence that animates your mind and soul. That kind of connection is rare, and in its absence, you learn to sit with the ache of being unseen. Carl Jung believed that the individuation process, the journey toward becoming your whole self, often requires stepping away from the collective, walking a solitary path in order to integrate the unconscious and awaken to your true nature. You live this truth, not just as an idea, but as a felt experience. The moments of your greatest awakening have often come when you are most alone, in the silence after loss, in the quiet hours of the night, in the stillness where no one could follow. You are shaped in the crucible of solitude, forged in the fire of introspection, and reborn through the insights that arise when no one else is watching. But that aloneness, while sacred, is not always easy. There are times it feels like exile, a separation from the world that leaves you longing for a return you can't quite make. Despite this tension, you continue to pursue truth over comfort. You understand that insight, once gained, cannot be unseen. You carry the responsibility of knowledge, the weight of awareness, the burden of clarity in a world that often prefers distraction. There's a quiet nobility in that burden, but it also creates a dissonance between what you feel inside and what the world reflects back. You may find temporary relief in books, art, music, or spiritual practice, mediums that speak to the part of you that cannot find expression in ordinary life. These become lifelines, companions, ways to channel the immensity of your inner world into something meaningful, something that transcends the limitations of language and reaches toward something greater. You are highly self-reflective and spiritually oriented, not as a result of external influence, but because your inner world naturally gravitates toward questions of existence, purpose, and transcendence. You don't merely go through the motions of life, you pause, examine, and probe the meaning behind every experience. For you, every event, relationship, and emotion is an opportunity to understand yourself more deeply. Your mind returns constantly to the question, who am I beneath the layers of conditioning, culture, and expectation? This quest for inner truth is not a phase or a reaction to hardship, it is a permanent orientation of your being. You reflect on your thoughts, observe your emotions, question your motives, and trace your patterns with the eye of an inner seeker. You are not content to live unconsciously, and so you resist the numbing rhythms of distraction that consume so much of the world's attention. This deep self-reflection naturally spills into spiritual awareness. You have an intuitive sense that life is more than what can be touched, measured, or explained. Whether through dreams, synchronicities, intuitive nudges, or a sense of being guided, you experience a dimension of life that speaks a sacred language. You may not follow any rigid belief system, but you are acutely aware of the divine thread running through all things. You feel connected to something larger than yourself, whether you call it God, the unconscious, the cosmos, or spirit. This connection is not just a belief, but a lived reality, something that moves through your thoughts, shapes your decisions, and anchors your sense of meaning. It's not enough for you to succeed by society's standards. You are driven to live authentically, to act with integrity, and to evolve into the fullest version of your soul. You might spend hours contemplating a single decision, not out of indecision, but because you are trying to align it with your higher self. You question whether your actions are rooted in truth or fear, love or ego. You reflect not only on what you do, but on why you do it and what it reveals about your inner state. This internal dialogue never stops. It becomes a companion, a teacher, a mirror that shows you who you are becoming. You are constantly in conversation with yourself, not in a way that isolates, but in a way that refines. This self-awareness often leads you to deeper emotional intelligence, empathy, and psychological insight. You see how your wounds have shaped your worldview, how your early experiences created patterns that still echo in your present, and how your shadow aspects carry both danger and wisdom. Carl Jung believed that the spiritual journey is not about escaping life, but about engaging with it more fully, more consciously, more soulfully. You embody this belief by embracing both your light and your darkness, your divinity and your humanity. You sense that inner work is sacred work, that knowing yourself is a way of knowing the universe. You read sacred texts not for doctrine but for revelation. You listen to your dreams not for fantasy but for messages from the unconscious. You find meaning in silence, ritual in solitude, and guidance in moments that others dismiss as ordinary. You move through life as both student and mystic, carrying the quiet knowing that the outer world is but a mirror for the inner one. You perceive reality through layers of psychological depth, seeing not just what is, but what it represents, what it conceals, and what it reveals about the human soul. For you, the world is not flat and objective, it is textured, multidimensional, and symbolic. Every situation becomes a canvas for insight, every interaction a potential unveiling of subconscious truths. You rarely take things at face value because your mind is trained to detect the undercurrents, the emotions that go unspoken, the projections that distort perception, the unconscious motives that shape behavior. Carl Jung called this the ability to see with the inner eye, a capacity to penetrate beneath appearances and recognize the psychological architecture that structures human experience. This is not something you turn on and off, it is your default setting, the lens through which you interpret existence, whether you're observing a stranger or reflecting on your own behavior. You are constantly scanning for deeper meaning. Notice micro-expressions, tone shifts, body language, and word choices that others overlook. You sense when someone is operating from fear, when unresolved trauma is guiding a decision, or when unacknowledged shadow aspects are influencing a conflict. You are not content with simple explanations like right or wrong, good or bad. Instead, you ask what this dynamic says about the person's past, their internal struggle, or their unmet needs. This makes you an exceptional listener and an intuitive analyst, someone others often turn to when they need clarity but don't know how to reach it themselves. Even when you're not speaking, you're processing, unpacking, and mapping the emotional territory of the moment. This psychological depth also influences how you perceive time, memory, and identity. You recognize that people are not static, but fluid, shaped by early experiences, shifting archetypes, and inner transformations that often go unnoticed even by themselves. You reflect on your own past not with nostalgia, but with the eyes of an inner psychologist. You revisit conversations, decisions, and emotional reactions to trace their origins and understand their deeper implications. You know that your outer reality is in many ways a projection of your inner landscape, and so you take responsibility for your perceptions. You question your biases, dissect your defense mechanisms, and actively work to become more conscious of the beliefs that shape your behavior. Because of this internal framework, you may often feel like you're navigating two worlds at once, the physical and the psychological, the literal and the symbolic. While others may focus on external outcomes, you are more attuned to inner shifts. A small insight can feel more powerful to you than a major achievement. A breakthrough in awareness is a kind of rebirth. You understand that healing and transformation happen not just through action but through deep internal recognition. You are aware of the unconscious as a living force, influencing dreams, emotions, desires, and even the people you attract into your life. This makes you especially receptive to dream interpretation, mythological themes, and the role of symbols in daily life. You don't just live your life, you interpret it, analyze it, and align it with a larger psychological and spiritual narrative that most people don't even realize they're a part of.